associate professor at Carnegie Mellon University. So I'm the director of Morphing Matter Lab in the Human-Computer Interaction Institute. And I also work across the College of Engineering at CMU as well. So today I want to discuss the topic of sustainable morphing matter, which use a lot of the 4D printing techniques, which I think is the relevant topic of this conference. So my lab operates, I want to say, across design, advanced manufacturing, and also morphing materials. So these are some design objects from the past, resulted from different kind of research work. And as you can tell, from all the way fabric to robots to even edible morphing materials. So
Hi,
while
Professor Yao.
Yeah.
Would you mind waiting just a second? The audio went out on the main computer.
Okay.
I'll let you know when it comes back on. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm connected.
Hello?
I'm using EDU Roam. Yeah. The internet is still out here for them on the main computer. I mean, I can bring this computer up if you want me to. That'd be good. Okay. Okay, Professor, yeah, we're gonna set it up using this computer.
Okay, no worries. I'm gonna stay on this page. It's a summary of what the lab.
Yeah, this is a good page. We can just do this for now. Like this.
No, that's a power.
Oh. Okay, you're good to go ahead.
Oh, I can be heard now? Am I good to go?
The sound is not.
Okay.
Let's try this. How's this work?
Is it working?
Oh, my computer's gonna die.
Well, I hear everything you say quite well, so I don't know.
Works now? Does this one work?
Try the AMX.
Okay, now we can try.
I can try.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
All right. Let's do this.
Okay,
go ahead.
All right. So this is my lab. We design objects. And so on the journey of designing things, we also realized sometimes design create more harms than benefits to the society, because we produce stuff, and not every things we produce don't bring side effects to the environment. And from a design perspective, as I mentioned, I'm from a Human-Computer Interaction Institute. There are a lot of methods and deep thinking about human-centered design, how to benefit people, basically. And often that's against nature-centered design. So in my lab, on a very abstract level and high level, we want to kind of bring this to way of thinking into a harmonious path. So basically, how do we integrate nature-centered and also human-centered design? And along this mission, I started to think about this concept called sustainable morphing matter. We all know morphing matter. It's stimuli responsive materials and also possible mechanisms and structures made of those composed of the stimuli responsive materials. So when we assign a sustainable behind it, what we mean is it's it has its shape and function dynamically reconfigure, while the engineering follows sustainable design principles, meets sustainable goals, or both. So this is a very recent review paper my team published. Basically gives people a more comprehensive view of what we mean by sustainable morphing matter. So we picked a few representative projects within our lab, but also beyond, covering, for example, mechanical computational fabric and robotic work, and really try to think through the commonality across those projects, which we would love to call them sustainable morphing matter, all the way from how they are manufactured, transported, used, and also what do we do after the end of life of those materials. So this is just a different diagram to show how we think through under each phase, the energy and the material consumptions are being considered. So for example, if we talk about 4D printing, if we talk about flat sheets can fold into 3D, that can fall into basically energy consumption or conservation during the transportation process. Basically, we're saving space and also transportation effort. And if you think about multi-stimuli responsive behaviors during the use case, and obviously you're using one object to fulfill multiple functions, that's also another way we think about at least how energy can be conserved during the use phase. And a lot of the morphing materials are made of degradable materials or recyclable material, and that's a very good example of how end of life is getting into the picture. I also think this figure is very relevant to this conference. So a big section is about 4D printing, but also beyond 4D printing, just talk about 4D manufacturing. We kind of made up the term, but it really means different kind of manufacturing techniques that can transform easy, flat, 2D, 1D structure, but after some post-stimuli can transform into pre-programmed targeted shape or multiple shape states. So 4D printing can obviously do that, but even an inkjet printing process, for example, or just a simple stamping process on a sheet can also create some of those stimuli responsive behavior once it's off the factory floor. So yeah, I welcome folks to take a read of the paper. We did spend some time thinking about it. And there are some more concrete applications of sustainable morphing matter, mostly from my own research lab and also collaborators. So we, like I mentioned, we think about sustainable morphing matter really situate in between these two worlds, nature-centered world and human-centered world. So across the past 5-6 years, we've been thinking how to design such materials and structures across multiple scale, as you can tell, all the way from micro scale to macro scale. Here are a few examples. This one is dealing with basically rain responsive morphing matter that can per se harvesting the ambient energy for ecological restoration. So the system is small, but we're trying to deploy massive amount of them and try to basically solve ecological problem. That's why I sort of situate this into the macro environmental oriented sustainable morphing matter. So in this work, we think about, basically we're inspired by a natural seed, its self-bearing behavior. So what you see is a species called erodium. So once the rain comes, the body basically will unwind and create an effective torque that allow the tip to basically drill into the ground. So it's a self-bearing behavior. And it happens, actually, it's very universal across multiple species. So we basically engineered some variations of this. So it's a replica, but a little bit beyond the natural geometry and designs as well. As you can tell, we increased the numbers of tails. So it basically has an optimized geometrical factor to increase the self-drilling rate. And we also use it to carry different payload. So now we can use it, for example, to carry sensors or carry specific seeds that's good for environmental conservation or restoration effort. So the idea is you can use drone to, again, drop massive amount of them from the sky because there are a lot of hard to reach places, for example, massive mountain scales or sharp slopes. And then once the rain comes, they will bury the seeds into the ground, and that will help to increase the germination rate. For reforestation effort, they usually do seedlings first, and then they have to dig a hole and manually bury the seeds. It's very common in the current natural restoration effort. But this approach basically allows the seeds to be buried into the ground. That helps the seeds to survive. So we also talk about how these can be used to go beyond just seeding, but really as a payload carrier to monitor and sense the environmental conditions. So those are ongoing projects. We also did some field tests. At this point, very, very limited field test. It's only about 150 seeds, and we're basically dropping them into geographic locations and understand how do they respond to natural rain and whether they can germinate or not after a while. It's a promising percentage of germination, but it's again very limited test on limited types of soils as well. So we're very excited now. More nonprofit organizations are reaching us out. We could potentially push this to be more practical. It is a manufacturing problem partially. So how do we have smart ways to basically quickly produce many of them so it makes sense in agriculture or restoration context? That's kind of a real question, engineering question, but actually very critical. And these are just more examples showing different variations of design. And some can carry wireless communication modules or even chemical sensors. So I already mentioned the vision a little bit, really thinking of this as ways to do seeding, help with the ecology, help with restoration after mountain fires. For example, a nonprofit organization from Maui reached us out. That was before the big fire happened, but they wanted to actually use the technique to do not reforestation, but basically grow more native grass on the coastal lines. And now we all know their situation a little bit more. Actually, the fire is partially because of non-native grasses are all over the island. And we can also think about using this for precision fertilization. So, okay, I'm going to continue talking about a different example. This, I also believe, is very relevant to this conference. It's about 4D printing. So there are many, I know a lot of experts sitting here are thinking, what are the killer apps of 4D printing? And a lot are coming from a soft robotic angle or biomedical devices perspective. So we in the lab are thinking of 4D manufacturing as the approach to achieve circular manufacturing. So this is a classic example we developed, as you can tell, from a few years ago, 2018. So think about basically a chair like this. If you try to print it in normal 3D printing FDM approach, this would take a long time. Even a 5 times shrink down version will take about 11 hours. But if you can print a flat sheet and then basically just heat it up and let it morph, you only need 32 minutes of printing time, and you can cut down the material use a lot. Basically, you don't need support material, and there's almost no effort for post-processing versus the 3D printing. You have to remove all the support materials. So we are thinking basically like IKEA furniture, you can flat pack, but really it can self-fold on site to save the post-assembly effort as well. And this is just so we basically develop a computational pipeline, and you can take any input target shape and simplify it into finite numbers of faces, and then you can unfold it like origami, and then you can generate a pattern that's for the flat 2D printing. So these can go beyond just, we call it developable geometry, basically those folding-based geometry. And this shows how non-developable geometries, non-zero Gaussian curvature surfaces can be handled with 4D printing as well. These are just we're just using PLA filament off the shelf So back to the idea of circular manufacturing. So if you think about 4D printing, you start with raw materials. You can choose even bio-based materials, and then you, through the flat printing to save manufacturing time and energy, and then you pack them flat so you can have an efficient transportation and packaging process. And then you can also try to be smart and save the assembly effort once it's on site in use. And you can also, because they are thermoplastic, basically easily recycle them and let them go through a different life cycle. So every story sounds really amazing, but there's, as you all know, who work with 4D printing, there are always challenges about the size of the objects we can print, and also the accuracy and during the morphing. So through the years, we've been really trying to sort of explore the geometrical space, and also thinking about how we can, for example, even incorporate electronics as part of the game. So you can have morph electronic product and have it compatible with the flat pick and place electronic manufacturing technique. Most of them are small, relatively small. And there are many future challenges, but if you ask me, one exciting one, because it's hard, is to possibly scale it up. That's not only because it's hard, not only because it's time consuming, right? It's also because it's just less accurate. It require more accurate and more multi-physics simulations to really predict the shape change. So these are just some thoughts. So on the left, this was a project done by a group of architects from ETH. I was just serving as a casual sort of technical consultant, but they showed they were able to actually use this thermoplastic-based 4D morphing to make modules for foam work. So they were able to assemble it and then spray concrete on the top of it to make a facade a few meters tall. And we're also aware that a lot of national labs and also research labs all over places are thinking of large-scale manufacturing and how this can be used for on-site construction. And we're also very hopeful some of the techniques I discussed can be integrated with large-scale manufacturing. So I keep moving to the third example that's related to human health and wearable. So this is also a relatively old project. I started to work on basically morphing materials for thermal management on body since I was a PhD student from MIT Media Lab. But this was one of the examples. So basically, the morphing fabric was powered by bacteria printed on an elastomeric substrate. So it's very sensitive because it's a thin layer, and also we're doing a thin layer of the substrate, but also a monolayer of bacteria cells on top. So this one, they can respond to the microenvironmental changes on your skin. So both the temperature and also the sweat, for example, can affect the opening and closing. So basically, when you get sweatier, the pores will open up to help the body to cool down, and once the body is cooled, the scales will close down again. So the plot on the right hand showed, if you see my cursor. So this one shows basically when the athletes wear this garment, the body temperature can be kept as a more consistent core temperature level. So this prevents athletes from getting cold, for example. So we actually worked with New Balance on this project, and they invited some professional runners to do the test with us. Lastly, I want to talk about food packaging waste. So this is also a fun project, a lot of very interesting mechanics problems, but fundamentally a fun project. So we're thinking, again, this old topic, how to save packaging space with morphing materials, but this time with commodity food. Actually, this we chose pasta as an example because if you think about, for example, macaroni pasta, so a simple geometric calculation will tell us about 67% of the volume in the packages for packing air. So we came out with this concept. Basically, you can make all pasta flat and flat pack, so it's safe space, but also just basically make the pasta less fragile to transport. And once on site and once you are starting to cook them, they take on different pre-programmed 3D shapes. So so this one I want to say. We were very inspired by some conversation with Italian chefs, but also Italian food science researcher. So they talk about around 1% of the green gas emissions in Italy was due to the consumption of pasta. So that is, again, both cooking and also consuming and transportation and everything summed up. And there are also different types of pasta. They are supposed to be paired with different sauce. So we want to make sustainable products, but we also don't want to sacrifice people's enjoyment. So we certainly want to make sure people have more than just thin hair flat pasta on their table. So that's why morphing matter happens to become an interesting killer technique to allow both sustainable transportation and enjoyable food experience. But this could be true for all sorts of commodity food. So we talk about pasta in Italy, but we can talk about instant noodles and other type of flour and rice-based food in Asia market, or even bread in the United States, for example. But it is really a way of thinking how dynamic and volumetric changing or shape-changing materials can play a role in the food industry. So I have 4 minutes to go and 6 minutes to go, and obviously, apparently there are more stuff. So I'll try to fly through some leftover slides. So a little bit more deeper about the approaches to design sustainable morphing matter. At least this is the approach we do in the lab. So we see sustainable morphing matter at the intersection of morphing materials and structure, and also the design. So from the morphing material and structure side, I think these are not new to the audience. So we often, as a community, think about the physical mechanisms, some of the computational design principles behind, and also the fabrication strategy. And on the design side, maybe this is slightly new, not new, but slightly more unique because we still consider our lab as a design-centric lab. So we try very hard to incorporate nature-centered design and user-centered design principles and methodology into thinking about sustainable morphing matter. And through this process, many steps generate data, and a lot of them ended up in our computational design or optimization tool, which will eventually instruct what kind of morphing matter we design. So this is manifested actually across many projects in the lab as well. We study both the physical morphing mechanism and also the underlying computational design and optimization algorithms. And I prepared 2 examples. I don't think I will be able to go through them, but maybe quickly go through the first one. So again, this is the 4D printing example I showed. Basically, thermoplastic transform into 3D, the whole IKEA furniture story I just gave. So a little bit deeper dive into the technology behind. I hope this is also super familiar to at least a portion of the audience. We're talking about basically melting down thermoplastic and quickly pull it right through a cold substrate. And we are straightening the polymer chain during the printing process. So once you heat it up again, the polymer chain try to go back to the more preferred chaotic state. That's why you see a shrinkage effect. And we leverage this a lot for 4D morphing. For example, if you print this shrinkable polymer on an inert substrate that doesn't shrink, you suddenly get a bilayer, and if you heat it up, it'll bend. And this is very predictable in numerical simulation context as well. A very simple way to control the bending angle is to just by controlling the length of the actuator region. As you can see, the longer the actuator is, the more accumulated angle it is. So with this controllable bending angle at each region, you can start to think about how to geometrically calculate the origami and turn it into like a foldable, printable structure. So I'm gonna skip the geometrical detail part, but the most important message I want to say, this is a bilayer. So we are using PLA as a top layer that shrinks when heated, and then we're using a TPU layer at the bottom that does not shrink. That's why we can get an effective bending, which we can use to incorporate into geometrical pipeline. But if you think about it from a sort of sustainable perspective, you're introducing two types of thermoplastic. It increases the complexity for recycling process. So if we're a little bit smarter as engineers and designer to think about whether we can use a single material to achieve similar thing, it's just an environmental conscious way of thinking. We might really push the sustainable design of these kind of morphing matter to a different level. So that's sort of what we did. So in this case, you don't have the TPU anymore. It's a single layer material, but you are purely leveraging the shrinkage at each voxel to basically compute shape. So how a flatly printed disc purely out of PLA can morph into 3D. In this case, a disc morph into a dome, right? And by controlling the individual layer thickness, you can control the local shrinkage ratio. And from there, you can start to really inversely compute all center symmetrical geometries. And if you're a little bit smarter about the flattening algorithm, you can now take in almost arbitrary 3D shapes and just basically convert it into a flat printing toolpath. So this is a teddy bear being flattened, and this is a face starting as a target shape, and then you can also flatten it and then generate print path. Again, this is a single layer PLA in this case. So the things are become more recyclable. I see I'm reaching out my time, so I'm just gonna skip the next example and directly go to my conclusion. So I want to say the mission of my team is about developing sustainable morphing matter. So that means morphable materials that are responsive, adaptive, and intelligent. By leveraging or harvesting water, wind, rain, sun, and other type of sort of renewable energy. And most of them don't necessarily use electricity. And we design them with sustainability consciousness. And there are always a lot of grand challenges for these type of things. Of course, more integrated shape, actuation, mechanical computation, even energy harvesting into the physical mechanism, but also thinking through how to bridge the high-level application with the low-level mechanism design through computational design and optimization, and how data-driven and physics-based approaches can really boost the computational design. And importantly, as a design team, we're also very interested in understanding how do we couple human and nature-centered design methods into thinking about the applications, and also as a community, how we push basically concepts like programmable materials and deployable structures and morphing materials and robotic matter into a more impactful real-world context, basically. So with that, I'd like to thank all the research collaborators who contributed to make the projects happen, and also the funding agencies. Thank you.